Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. My name is Juan Londoño and today's topic, when is it time to replace your camera? Now I'm going to confess to you, I suffer from something called gear acquisition syndrome. I almost said gas first. And it's basically gas, right? And that just means that I love looking at new gear and often I'll buy things that I don't necessarily need. But that isn't a good way to really spend your money, and I'm making a lot of changes to the way I think when it comes to that. But I've done that a lot in the past, right? So I don't want you to go down that path and just replace gear because you want it. I mean, if you have the money and that's the only vice you have, it's not the worst thing in the world. But let's try to make smarter decisions. What do new cameras offer us, right? Well, new cameras, I wrote a couple of these down, right? They lock on focus quicker. They track subjects a lot better. They have higher burst rates or frames per second, better ISO, right? So for low light, you get less grain in your picture. So these are some of the things, and there's so many more that new cameras have that some of the older cameras didn't. So without spending any more time, and my voice is playing games on me, without spending any more time, let's go into the 10 reasons that I have here as to why you would want to replace your camera, and really for you, asking yourself the question, is that time now? Has that time come? Number one is less hunting. Now, we're not talking about us hunting anything or even hunting for gear. Hunting is a characteristic of a lens, right? When something is out of focus and you're trying to focus it quickly, the lens will hunt for the subject, right? That's called lens hunting. So I put it as less hunting because we're going to do less hunting with new gear. Now you might ask yourself, when is this important? When is hunting for a lens important? Quick hunting, right? Locking onto your target quickly. Well, if things are flying in or coming into your frame, in and out very sporadically, it's a good time to get a lens that has quick locking abilities, right? Less hunting time. So, for example, if you're shooting butterflies, right, and you're looking at this flower, and you've already put your camera on a tripod and you have this flower in sight, and you've opened up the view a little bit so you can see things coming in and out. Butterflies are big enough that your camera will track them. It's not a bee or an ant or something like that. And this butterfly comes into the picture, and here you are trying to lock on focus, and your lens is going bzz, 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 and it's trying to find the subject, and it can't. You may be missing the perfect shot when the butterfly is going right by the flower, or when it's landing on the flower, right before it makes contact, something really cool like that, right? So definitely, if you need a lens that locks on targets quickly, cameras are responsible for this. Yes, lenses also will help the camera, but really it's the software in the camera that is responsible for this. So what we just talked about was locking on a target, right? When that target or subject, when that subject comes into that frame, your camera has to very quickly lock on, right? That's one characteristic of the camera lens marriage. The other one is tracking. When the camera has already locked on focus to that butterfly, and that butterfly is moving towards you, away from you, up and down, can the camera continue to maintain that focus? So that's focus tracking, and that's a whole nother ability, also helped by the lens, but really managed by the camera. When is this important? Well, kind of like the butterfly, but things might be moving a little faster here, right? So you may be at a motorcycle show, race, a car race of some type, right? Formula One, NASCAR, whatever it is, right? The European one, Le Mans, any race that the Isle of Man TT race for motorcycles, whatever it is you're at, right? Sports, where players are, you happen to be in a spot where the runners are coming towards the touchdown or the goal, and they're moving very quickly. Your camera will lock on quickly to that subject, but if that subject is coming towards you or away from you very quickly, and the camera doesn't have good software, it may lose that focus, right? And It may be locking onto things that are around because it gets confused. So it's not tracking your subject very well. If you have a need to track your subjects, and these are fast moving subjects, and your camera's not doing that well, that's probably a good reason to get another camera. Number 3 is high frames per second or burst rates. Now I don't call it frame rates because we typically reserve that for video, right? Frame rate of 60 frames per second or frame rate of, so I don't like using it in still photography, but high frames per second, which technically is a frame rate, right? Or, sorry, or just high burst rates, and that's really what we call them, right? When is that important? Well, when you want to capture a very specific moment in time, right? So say your son or daughter dives off a diving board and is coming into the pool and has that perfect, vertical drop, right? And their hands are first, their feet are up in the air. And right before they hit the water, you hold that shutter down and your camera's giving you 20, 30, even 40 frames per second, right? Why not 50 if you can? You don't want to do this too long because it'll eat up your memory and you have too much stuff to look at. But if you do it for a couple of seconds, you'll be able to find that exact location where the hand coming down onto the water touches the water. And what a beautiful picture that is, right? But if you have 5 frames per second, you might get the moment right before, and then you might get the moment where half of the arm is already in the water, right? And so before, like maybe 6 inches above the water, and then the next shot, half of the arm is in the water, and that doesn't work, right? So the baseball shot, the famous baseball shot where the pitcher's releasing the ball and it just leaves his hand, beautiful photograph where the batter is waiting to hit the ball and the ball is making contact, right about to make contact with the bat. You're going to need a high burst rate, right? So if you didn't care about that before and you have that camera like I do, right? The 5D Mark III, which is, I don't even know what this is because I've never really needed to challenge it. I think it's like 7 frames per second. If you've never needed 20, 30, 40, 50 frames per second, then you're okay. But if now you're getting into some kind of a business where you need that, you're gonna need a new camera. Number 4 is better ISO handling, right? So less noise when it's kind of a dark scene. So when is that important? Well, say you decide to start getting into portraits, natural portraits, where you're shooting people in their natural environments, and many people like to do indoors, their rooms, their living rooms, and you're trying to keep the lighting to a minimum. That's going to be important for you, right? The low noise. If you're doing weddings, you know that receptions oftentimes take place in very dark halls, sometimes with the ceilings painted black. You can't even bounce a light. I've done more than I care of those with the black ceilings, and you feel handicapped, right? You even with a good flash, you have nowhere to bounce it. You have to light it right at them. So you're going to be in that situation a lot if you're doing anything really that's indoors, and you're doing it often. Then that's going to be a problem for you, right? If your camera doesn't give you good, high ISO capabilities, right? Where the noise is down low. Number 5, we really don't need to discuss because we just did. If you need a high megapixel count, then you're going to have to buy a camera that gives you that, right? And I bought this camera, the GFX 100S from Fujifilm. It doesn't have to be that one. There are 60 megapixel cameras that might be fine for you. If you've been shooting a 20 megapixel camera, then maybe a 50 megapixel camera or 45, like the Canon R5 is enough, right? The camera I'm shooting this video with is a Canon M6 Mark II. It's a 32 megapixel camera, and I'll be honest with you, it's a tiny little mirrorless camera that if I walked into a wedding would look funny, but I can very easily shoot anything I want with it. And my 5D Mark III is a full frame DSLR, and it shoots 23 megapixels, right? This, M6 Mark II that I'm filming with is a crop sensor, and it shoots 32 megapixels. If you do the math and you convert that to a full frame equivalent by multiplying by 1.6, I think it gives you like 40 something megapixels. I don't remember the exact number. You can check that yourself, but it's a very good megapixel count for just about anything. So you need high megapixels, you're gonna need another camera. This is a good time for a water break again, This is the second video where I'm going to do a water break and I have nothing to grab and drink. So let me go get that. Hold on a second. All right, I'm a happy camper now. I've got my water. Get your beverage, take a sip, and come right back. Number 6 for buying a new camera is added features, right? If you have a camera, for example, like my 5D Mark III, this screen doesn't come out, doesn't move, doesn't pivot, doesn't do anything. If you need that, because now you're starting to do work where you're doing like what I'm doing here, where I want to see what I'm recording, you need to pivot that screen. You can always buy a screen, which I actually did for the 5D Mark III. But if you want to do a lot of selfies, you don't want to carry a lot of weight, you want a little flippy screen, then you have to buy another camera, right? If you want a screen that just has better resolution, works better in bright light, because you go out often to shoot and you can't see your screen, you're gonna need a new camera. If your viewfinder is just a crappy viewfinder with low resolution and it's bothering your eyes, or you're just upset you can't work with it anymore, you're gonna need a new camera. There are many things we can buy for our cameras, like if your grip isn't good, you can buy a grip, right? I actually did that with this Fujifilm. I didn't buy a grip because the grip in this camera is actually phenomenal, but I added an extension at the bottom which has an Arca Swiss plate, and it has an Arca Swiss plate on the side, so I can actually, you know, mount stuff on the side here, and it accesses my battery underneath. It just gives me like another almost ½ inch for my pinky finger on the bottom, right? So I bought this plate just for comfort, ease for shooting outdoors. So don't buy a camera if you don't have a comfortable grip, because you can buy that, right? There are many things we can buy for our cameras. One thing I want to tell you is make sure that if it's a feature inside the camera, like a higher, you know, burst rate or something like that, make sure it hasn't been resolved, or maybe quicker focus. Make sure it hasn't been resolved with a firmware update. So if you have an older camera like me, I keep this up to date with my firmware updates, because they have made updates to this camera. There are things that this camera does now that it didn't do when it came out, like eye tracking, right? It doesn't track it as it moves closer and away from me, but if I'm going to shoot a still, and it'll find the eye of the model or the subject, and then I can take the picture. If that person walks towards me, yes, I said that right, it won't do that, right? The new cameras do that. So there are certain things that a mirror camera can't do that a mirrorless camera can do. But you get the point, right? Make sure you do firmware updates in your camera. Make sure you get all the new functionality, so that you're not buying a camera for something that actually exists for your camera already. You're going to love number 7. I'm getting better at this. Number 7 is show. Now, you know, it's not like wearing red bottom shoes, right, for show, or a nice, you know, handbag, or, you know, something like that, right? Nice pair of shoes. Sometimes in the photography world, in the cinema world, you've got to impress a customer, right? You're taking money, and in many cases a few $1,000s, from somebody to shoot their wedding, reception, even some pictures before the engagement pictures, right? So you get all this money. Like I mentioned before, I can use that M6 Mark II, that Canon, that little camera, mirrorless, with some good lenses, because I really do have some good lenses for it. And technically speaking, I can shoot a wedding. Well, I mean, I got rid of my 24-70, so that's out of the picture. But if I get one back, I can shoot a wedding with this camera. So my point is, the camera's not going to inhibit me. The problem is that I'm going to walk into a wedding holding this tiny little thing that I can fit in my pocket, and I'm going to put a lens on it, and they're going to look at me and go, "You're kidding me, right? You're going to shoot my wedding with that?" Like, I just bought my stepson, you know, a Canon R6 that's twice the size of that thing. Come on, give me a break. So there are times where show is important, where we have to show that for people that don't know anything about photography, the size matters, right? You walk in with a bulky beast. This thing is all metal, this Fuji. And the lenses are huge, because it's actually a large frame format, right? So this frame, the sensor is so big that the lens diameter has to be big. This is a 32-64 lens, but Look how beefy this thing is, right? So look at my 5D Mark III. You walk in, put a big lens on this, and it's impressive, and nobody's going to question you, right? So if you're doing work, you're charging good money, then there's going to be a show factor. You're going to need a camera that tells people that don't know anything about photography that you actually know what you're doing. I wish life were different, that these things didn't matter, but they do. One other reason, number 8, for replacing your camera is just a retired camera. That M6 Mark II has been retired. So if I'm already thinking of getting a second one because I don't have a camera for videos, and I actually love that little camera. I took it to New York City and I did all my street photography with that thing. Sometimes it's not practical to take 100 megapixel. I would love to do a bunch of street photography with this camera. I don't always feel safe carrying it around because it's a lot of money. And it's big, and for street photography where you're shooting people, right? People are coming at you and you're trying to be discreet. This like yells, "I'm taking your picture, I'm taking your picture." Yeah. And then, you know, they come over and say, "Excuse me, did you just take my picture?" I don't want confrontation, right? So that little M6 Mark II, I put it in my waist, I look down at it, it looks like I'm, you know, fidgeting with the menu system, and I'm actually taking pictures. So that camera is awesome. I'm thinking about buying another one, but if you're doing professional work, right? And say, for example, you're shooting weddings and you have gear and lenses and all stuff for your camera, and your camera company announces that that camera is being completely retired, and you depend on parts, right? You know, for reliability and consistency, you want to walk into places, not worry, and you're starting to have to buy parts for it, then it might be time for a new camera. Number 9, and I'm not doing the finger thing, is basically peripherals, right? Many drivers, young drivers that I knew, because people apparently don't care too much about this anymore, but back about 10 years ago, many of the young drivers that I knew were buying, say, like a Honda Civic, because it was the type of car that everybody made accessories and peripherals for, right? You can buy turbos, supercharged, whatever the heck you wanted for that car, ground effects, different wheels, suspension systems. You can change it, modify it completely, right? That's important to some people, making things their own, unique, making them better. If you're into that with cameras, right, you need a cage. You want to take your camera and buy a cage for it so you can use it for filming video. You want to be able to, you know, and I didn't put this in here, right? But if you need better video capability, I'm going to throw it in this section because I don't have a, you know, that would have been the 11th point actually. So let's stick to the 10 points, but in peripherals, it doesn't really apply. But if you need video capabilities, like my 5D Mark III doesn't maintain focus on the subject once I'm in video. You lock on it and then you have to manually track it. All my other cameras are mirrorless and they track subjects when I'm filming video, and that's what I need, right? So if you're going to start doing video and you have an older camera, you're going to have to buy a new camera. Great, the garbage truck is passing by. Okay, the garbage truck moved further down the block. We can continue. So number 10 is the last point here, right? And like I said, it probably should have been 11 for the video thing. I apologize for that. Number 10 is basically your camera's broken, right? There's a part of your camera that's not working. It's either not working with one of your lenses because it doesn't read it right, and your lens is fine because you tried on other cameras and it works fine. Maybe your screen up on top is not working, right? And you're trying to get around by using the back screen. It starts to get difficult to, you know, to work with a camera that's not giving you everything that it has to offer, right? So it makes it difficult for many reasons, as you know, right? Especially if you're making money off your camera, then it's not even going to hold water when you walk in and people see you with, you know, messed up gear. So in that case, that's number 10, and that's going to be very simply a good time to get another camera. So my fellow lovelies, thank you very much for your time. You're always so appreciated. I wish you knew. Love you guys from the bottom of my heart. Until the next video, please stay safe, drink your water, and tune in. Please like down below if you enjoyed this video, subscribe if you want to keep getting new videos, and I will see you in the next one. Ciao for now.